Good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming in today. I think, we're really looking forward to talking to Imal, who is what I would consider a true entrepreneur. Started from pretty much his own company and had a very valiant exit. So very fortunate to have Imal with us here, and I think what's even better is that he wants to share his experience with startups in Sri Lanka and now has moved on to investing in startups. So let's kind of start with a few questions around your journey so far, Imal. You kind of went through the corporate route first and got a lot of experience before you started Nsinga, I believe. Can you tell us a little bit about that journey, and then A, what drove you to start your own entity? B, what were some of the cultural aspects that you took with you from Millennium IT, from your kind of global positions, etc., that you brought into startup with you and and started Nsinga?
Yeah, thanks, Jeevan, for having me. I'm really excited to be part of this conversation and also sharing my experiences. So basically, I grew up in a very normal background where from Gampaha, right? So I passed my scholarships exam from my village school, and then went into Anand College, and then from there I got into University of Moratuwa to do electronics and telecom engineering, right? And then from there I started my career at Millennium IT. So it's kind of the way that our teachers teach at school, right? So you study well, and then education system teach us, right? So, and I did exam, and there were no other alternatives in my mind at that time. So when I got to Millennium IT, I got to see how Tony works and what their thinking is. I mean, I had that first-hand experience on working with them. That those were the days, early days of Millennium IT. They were also a kind of startup those days, right? So I was inspired by them, and I wanted to be like them, right? So that the kind of first seeds of entrepreneurship came in. But again, it was just a kind of a distance dream. Then once, I mean, I wanted to do whatever I do the best, and I wanted to be the best in business in whatever I do. In that context, like, okay, I've been a network engineer at Millennium IT, and then I wanted to, and I was a Cisco networking engineer, and my dream was to work for Cisco, because when you are doing in a local company, working technologies in a US company, so you wanted to be working for that company. So I got into Cisco. That was my first multinational job. I got to travel around the world, and that is where I started, being a local subject matter or expert to become a person who's playing on a regional level. And then IBM hired me. IBM got me into Singapore, and with that, I got even bigger exposure, right? So there I made the switch from being a subject matter expert or engineer or consultant to become more of a business development and business management kind of a role. And then from there, from IBM, I went on to HP. I did roles at APAC level in cutting edge technologies like, telco cloud, NFV, software defined networking. So I manage those businesses for them. So there are all these organizations. Why I'm saying this is, it's not to brag about myself, but just to share the journey that I learned, how to deliver the projects, how to build products, and then also I've seen how to sell products regionally, and how it can be done internationally, and what are the kind of qualities you need to have. in order to do that, right? So there I learned all these, got these all experiences, and also got to know a lot of people whom they helped me, and they were instrumental in the Nsinga journey later on. Like for example, uh, Vijay, I met at Ananda College. He was my co-founder, right? And we were at the same class. And then at HP, I met Martin and Ashok, whom they joined Nsinga, because this is how the team got formed, right? So the school, and then the companies I work for. And then while going through this journey, I mean, I was one time one of the top performers when won the chairman's club, and had the opportunity to go to Hawaii as a retreat. But the next year, when they were doing restructuring, my position was redundant. So I mean, I decided in these multinationals, no matter how good you perform, someone looks at Excel sheet and makes a decision, you don't even know, right? What's your faith is. So that's the day that I decided, okay, I'm not going to hang around here. But luckily, another manager came in and said, no, you're not going. You're going to work in my department. It was a new business. So I had another life in that. But then I have already made my mind, this is the reality. I need to start something on my own. And also I realized there are a couple of friends who were doing really well, and one guy died from cancer and all that. So I saw what is happening to their families. Like you can be in the best paid job, because like once you cut that code, then you're kind of nobody, right? I mean, it's not to discourage people who are working in corporates, but this is how I saw it. And at the same time, I couldn't take this like every decision you have to take, you need to ask from 10 different people, 10 different bosses, and you need to convince yourself every Monday to go to work, because it's so stressful, even though you are paid really well. So at that time I have decided I'm starting. So I've slowly started working on the background, because Vijay at that time, he also have done his multinational journey, and he worked in US, UK, and then he has also come here. He was also saying, Machan, let's start something. I said, okay, why don't we start? So I will fund initially. So Vijay first came out, and he started with a couple of developers, and I was kind of co-founder plus investor funding, because I had a job in Singapore, paid $1 salary, and I was handling region. So I had the luxury to come back and forth to Colombo as well for work. So that's how the Nsinga was started. And then after a couple of years, when the thing was going well means, I mean, started going in the right direction, I decided it's time for me to cut the code, and then I came on full time. By that time, we had the product, we had the first customer, and we needed, because Vijay, what he was doing is he was building the product, but somebody is needed to build the company, because product is one thing and building the company is one thing. So we complemented each other. So I came out of my job in like 2017, but the company was started in 2015.
Yeah.
And we exited signed the contract 27 Jan 27 December 2019, and first Jan we got the money for all the accounts, like for all our investors. So that's a kind of journey, and why I started, and it was a long answer, and how I started, how I met the people. That's a kind of long answer to your short question.
I just have some follow-up questions to that, because it's a very interesting journey, first of all, right? You went through kind of your corporate journey, your international journey. Looking back, right, for entrepreneurs, there are some cultures that encourage entrepreneurship, and you mentioned your experience with Tony that inspired you, and there are some cultures that don't, right? When looking back at your experience in IBM, all of these companies that you worked with, what would you say was a good culture that exposed you to a lot? Obviously, Millennium IT. What were there others that helped you form, an entrepreneurial mindset, and whether those that didn't, I guess I'm trying to give this for the benefit for people who are trying to follow in your footsteps. What were the type of companies that you would suggest to kind of go in and work with before, I guess, you go into your own startup?
Yeah, I think firstly, like you need to be thorough on one area, like a T-shape, where you need to have expertise in one area, but at the same time you need to understand other areas, like a T, right? So the depth in one area and the breadth in many areas, right? So we got exposed to things because we were just raw engineers. The word of English, I mean, when I was at MIT, but they gave us exposure to learn in customers, right? I remember once Peter was telling me, hey, you're presenting, and then I it was overnight. I was like late in English and all that. The next day he says, no, this is wrong. You need to change the presentation. And I said, yeah, I can change the presentation, but I don't know how to say it now, right? Because so then I mean, these are the kind of experiences we got at MIT. I mean, primarily because the people who we had at MIT at that time, right? So you can't. I mean, MIT was a startup at that time, and we were lucky, right? So maybe situation is different. So then at Cisco, I learned how to kind of evangelize the technology, how to kind of really pitch a solution. And at IBM, I learned how to manage the P&Ls, right? How to understand like the financial mechanics of how a deal or a project could be constructed, right? And the legal aspects of that. I learned that. And HP again, I had the opportunity to run a large business across APAC. So, and that was also starting off. So that again a startup within a multinational, but it was tough doing a startup within a multinational because all that red tape also comes even though it's a startup. Yeah. So all these help. But again, then when I came to start of our own company, I have seen that, right? I've seen that, and then I like that. Okay, we need to, if we are to take on these big companies in the global stage, then you need to have that insurgent mentality, like small teams. Like I'll take a small example where I mean it may be sensitive, but I'm taking in the spirit of good as example. Like if you look at like the LTT had happened, like initially this small team, and they came and destroyed a lot of big army camps in Sri Lankan army, and then towards the end of the war also it was like small teams of Sri Lankan army was doing the same. Like it's that small team, the insurgent mentality is needed in a startup, right? Because highly trained, but few people, highly equipped. So you have the mentality that, hey, I can take on these big establishments, and because you know how they work, and you are well trained, and you are in a like kind of fearless suicidal mentality, right? And that's the kind of mentality the startups needs to have, that insurgent mentality.
Absolutely. So just to ask a follow-on question, picking a team, I think you mentioned that most of your startup team you had met through work and from school, etc. Was it a conscious decision, or was it that you and Vijay had skill set balance? Was he more technical than you, and you had more biz devs strength? Was it a conscious decision that when you formed your company that there was this kind of skill set matching and kind of division of what was required to be done in the startup, or was it just by chance? I mean, and what would you suggest for others to do as well?
I mean, to be honest, I didn't plan and evaluate, okay, who should I take my co-founder, and then I go and cherry pick Vijay. It just happened. I mean, sometimes it could be luck, but we complemented each other, and we knew each other. Like I knew him like since 1986 or whatever, right? So I knew him like for about 20 years. When we were like already starting, we were already knowing each other 20 years, because same school. And then he also had worked with MIT with me. And then see, while I was like kind of a more of a he was still keeping his tech for that 20 years. He never, because I moved on from being tech to consulting to biz dev to sales to business management. But he was on tech, but he was like a developer, and then he still enjoy coding, and then architect, and he was managing development team. He had that complete like building product kind of thing, and it worked really well, and we complemented each other. Like for example, I knew never going to see what he's doing or double checking or second guessing or whatever, right? At the same time, he never looked into what I'm doing, the finance and sales and all that, or legal. Whenever I give something to him, he just signed blindly, right? So that's the kind of trust we had with each other, and the understanding. And we had our fair share of fights, shouting at each other. The next day we are fine, because we had that understanding together, right? It's not like, okay, you had a one bad this thing and the guy is gone, because we had that closeness of the relationship. We can say, F off, but next day we both are again fine. Nothing happened. We are working, right?
Absolutely. Okay. So you would recommend to work with a co-founder that you understand that there might be friction, but whatever said and done, you guys are going to work together and kind of calm.
Yeah, I think it's like marriage, right? So you have no option. You have to sit together, right, and sail it through. I mean, sometimes if it doesn't work, then it doesn't work. But we both had the we understood each other, and we both wanted to see, and we both didn't kind of give up. We had a lot of many difficult moments.
Okay.
Together in the company.
So let me go back to 2016. I guess that's when you started Insinga, right? 2000.
We started actually 2015. Late 2014 we did, but the real business started in 2015, early 2015.
Okay, so when you started 2015, I think you had this interesting space, IoT and analytics, kind of carved out from a tech perspective, right? But did you really see a product ahead, or did you have to first get your first customer on board to then figure out the product, or did you guys just make hey, this is working elsewhere, we're going to copy this model in Sri Lanka? Like, walk me through how you came to product market fit.
Yeah, it's a very good question. So basically, when we starting off, we wanted to do something on the industrial IoT and the data kind of space. That was the idea, and then we saw that that's a and that excited us as well, because Vijay was coming from a real-time data background, because he was part of the team who built the world's fastest trading engine, real time, right? So he's a guy who talks about real time. And I was a guy coming from telecom, and again, like connecting things, right? So kind of our skill set and credibility matched with the real time data and Internet of Things, and that was also kind of booming. So we wanted to do that, but we didn't have, okay, now out of this, what product we gonna do? We didn't have that, but we were passionate about that. And then we were looking at few use cases, and then we realized, hey, let's not do this on a B2C space, because that's crowded, and and anyone can kind of enter into it. But if you look at B2B, there's not many players do this. Plus, you understand how to sell, how to build enterprise class software, which he knew and I knew how to get to the customers, right? So in that sense, we knew that it's going to be on the industrial IoT space. It's not IoT, but it's industrial IoT. It's data, but it's real-time data and it has to be B2B. Like we knew that much, but then we engage few like we first engage dialogue. What can we do in this area, and then MAS and then Singlung in Singapore. Like we had these 3-4 customers. We were trying different use cases, and we were saying, okay, let's build a platform across meeting all these use cases around this, and that was a big. And then we soon realized platform game is primarily for big funded players or big corporates, and we need to find our niche. So then when our engagement with MAs, when we realized that look, no one is looking at this apparel and manufacturing, no one going and solving the problems in the shop floor, in the factory floor, because it's too dirty and it's too difficult, and you really need the domain knowledge and the tech, right? And then also we realize it's something that Sri Lanka is known. Sri Lanka is known for producing best quality apparel, and if we build a product here, and that has the credibility to sell overseas, and then we look at the scalability. Okay, start with a line, and you have 20 line, 50 line in a factory, and then the factories, these owners have 10 factories, 20 factories, 50 factories, and in a country you have 1,000 factories, 10,000 factories, and you have like this 50 countries like that, right? So we saw how it scales, and no one is serving that market. And if we build that out of Sri Lanka, and if MAs become our customer, it's like you build a product in US for fintech, and if Bank of America or Citibank become the customer, and then everyone else would have a higher probability to buy. And we were saying, okay, if it's here, it's scalable. If you do it with this, if MAS buys it, we know that everyone would buy it. That was our thinking, but it was not the case. We realized later MAS is also like a innovator, outlier, exceptional, and we had to kind of make it usable for like mass market. But our thinking was like that. So the short answer is like we didn't have a clear cut plan. This is what we're gonna do, and we fine tune it along the way, and we ended up where we were along the way. And our story and our pitch got improved as we go on, but we didn't have a real plan or copy. And then, but then along the way, once we got clarity, then we started learning from different products. So and things like
that. Was that was 2015? You started doing some use cases, right? Was it 2-3 years?
2016. Yeah. By the time 2016, only we realized again this is the thing that we're gonna go. And probably about 2017, we decided we cut down all the other use cases and only focus on this. We one product, one company, one product, one industry, and everyone knew this is what we had, and this is what we have to sell, and who are the type of customer, and who we need to approach in this customer. And when we land in a country, we knew exactly go to which organization, which association, and then take this list and take the contacts, go and right. So it's very focused from 2017 onwards.
That's awesome, because I think it's very easy to continue to do kind of use cases and then kind of have this baby on the side and try and juggle everything. But what you've actually done is you completely stopped the use cases and said, I'm just going to focus on this one thing and be the best at this one thing. Was that the case?
Yeah. That's how we operated in last 3 years out of the 5-year stint we had. First 2 years we tried. I mean, we tried, and we didn't have money, and we were kind of desperate at sometimes. There's always this question on the product versus project. Do we do the product, or can we take this project and get some money in, because I need to pay salaries, right? So we did all that. It's not that like we didn't do that, but as we get more and more funding and all that, when we could afford, we really let those things go. And we started focusing more on that one product strategy.
That was going to be my next question, right? How did you fund the transition? did you find outside investment, or did you because obviously when you're going from a use case to a product, and if you're going from a product, especially if it's a SaaS business, sometimes the revenue from that is not enough to pay salaries, etc. How did you go from transition from being a use case company to the services, like this product focused company, and fund that thing? I think the users will really like some background on that, and how you handle it.
Yeah, so basically from day one we wanted to be a product company. Use cases we did was because we were not 100% sure on which use case gonna fly, right? So we wanted to be product company, but then how did we fund that? I mean, initially the funding came from my savings and things like that. But because we wanted to have the first customer, the product and all that before we go into the investors, because we knew like if we walk in without nothing, we don't get money, or we get the money, but it will have to give up too much for too little. So by the time we were clear on the product scaling strategy and all that, then we went into the investors. So first money in, outside money in, was Dinesh Shafter. He was really nice. He didn't even do a due diligence. He just put $500,000, and
Always good to have investors like that. Always good to have investors like that, I said.
Yeah, right. Once in a while he calls me and give little hard time, but otherwise he don't even bother calling, right? So but he was a very nice guy and great investor to have. Then so Dinesh was more of like, okay, you take it, and I don't have if I call him and ask, hey, can you set up this meeting, he'll immediately do it. Otherwise he wouldn't bother. So then like that was in 2016. He put in money, and then we had the kind of capital to focus on for getting the product. And then we decided, hey, we go to Bangladesh now, right? Because we proven in Sri Lanka, MAS largest customer, largest company probably in Southeast Asia. Even though Bangladesh larger market, they don't have MAS or Brandix or Hydra Money like companies. They are smaller companies, but many. So then we went into Bangladesh. We wanted to test ourselves. When we go in there, we realize, hey, it's different there, because Sri Lanka is a quality focused market and process is really well aligned. Bangladesh is messy, right? So your product needs to handle those. So we had to kind of rewrite the code and make it more balanced for volume and quality, right? So both. So that different type of factories we could accommodate. That's where the product get into the next level. Then if we had spent too much time perfecting it, getting the market share in Sri Lanka, by that time we had a set product and we would have gone there and tried to sell, it wouldn't have worked. But we went in not because we had few customers, because when you go into other country, they'll ask, hey, which customers you have in your own. We had that, but at the same time we were not too far in the journey, so that we had the flexibility to get the product out to a wider audience, right? So with that, with Dinesh money, we had the courage to go into Bangladesh. We started there, and then we realized we need to go into other markets as well. And by that time we were getting customers. We needed more people to build the product in a more comprehensive way, and we knew that we could take on competition. There's no better product than ours. Then we at that time, BOE, we started talking. BOE also came calling us, because I think they knew Dunamis have invested, so they knew that we are probably a decent company to invest in. So then BOE came in. Then BOE brought in that growth mindset.
It helped Kishan.
Hey, grow fast. Is Kishan in the call?
But I think it helped you move from Dynamis to BOV.
Yeah, he's the guy who recommended us, right? Because he knew in Dunamis
Yeah.
who we were, and then when he went to BOV, he said, "Hey, it's a good company. We should invest." I think he would have told that to Prajit and Rajan, right? So that's how it happened. So then BOV came in. BOV brought in like that kind of discipline on and the growth mentality. Hey, you need to grow fast, go international, do this, do that, right? That kind of sense of urgency. But at that time we felt like, oh, it's a bloody pain, right? But now after you've gone through that, that it has happened for the betterment of the company, because we grew fast. And then BOV also brought in Singapore Angel Network, and like BOV helped us go into India, which was not in our business plan, and we had a great run in India with help of Rishi and them. And then at the same time, Singapore Angel Network, they connected us to Indonesia, and then also they introduced us to Selingo. Selingo first wanted to partner with us because they were building kind of complete digitization of supply chain for fashion, and they were good on the front end. They had the B2C marketplace and B2B marketplace, and they had all that covered, but they didn't have the piece to connect the factories, and we had that, right? And they thought, like, they put together that they have the control of the end-to-end, from the consumer to suppliers to then to the manufacturers, right? And that's what Zelingo platform is doing. So along the way, like, we also after BOV came in, we grew fast, and then we double our valuations in a year. And then Dialogue Innovation, DIF, came in, and few other investors, and they were not even, their money was not even in when, by the time Selingo gave us the term sheet, we want to acquire you, right? And I said, like, okay, fine, but we are in the midst of fundraising. I want to get, because I have committed to these investors, I want to get them in. I could have otherwise get more money in my hand and the other shareholder, but I've committed to them. I said I need to get them in. So Zelingo also accommodated that, right? So then they got like money in the fastest time, money in, money out, 100% return, right? So that's for some of the investors. But Dunamis and BOV, they were in it, like, for some time. So that's a bit of journey on the investment side, how we raise money and why we raise money. We raise money to grow, right? At the same time, they also brought in ideas to help us grow, and it was smart money.
I think that's a great story. If you were to advise startups today based on your journey, would you tell them not to divest early, but figure out product market fit, get some cash flow going, and then move? Or I mean, you tell me, what is your advice? What would you advise to startups listening in?
But that's what we did, and that's what we did. Like, basically, that worked for us. But I don't know, maybe for some people don't have their capital to put in, but they are really, then they might have to. But initially, better to get some angel investor who really understands you. Not you are not ready to take the real investor money at the early stage, right? So my suggestion is build a product, get your first customer, get that going, and then you are also, because one thing is also, Jeevan, like, you take money from whoever, it's a hard-earned money, right? You can't just play around like you're playing, casino. Like, if it doesn't work, I don't know. I don't feel like that, because I take $1 from someone, I feel great responsibility to that, and I feel like I need to repay that faith. So if yourself is not sure, the company is not sure, don't go and waste other people's money. Just make sure that it's working and you are sure that it's going to work, and then go and raise money. That's my advice. Morally, as well as it's good for you, and you're not diluting too early. At the same time, even if you at least you have a good night's sleep, even if it fails.
Yeah, absolutely. So just a quick note, we've passed the 30-minute mark. So I would like, if there's anyone who wants to ask questions, please feel free to put it up here. We'll try and collate the questions and ask him all. It's a great opportunity to ask him questions that you might have. I'm going to ask my team also to look at the Hatch Facebook page and get any questions from there as well. So I think, Imal, now you've done it, $15 million exit, I believe. You've
5.
Sorry?
15.5.
15.5.
I have a story for that. 0.5 million also, right?
Okay, go on. Tell us about the 0.5.
Yeah, so that was actually on the legal contracting side. Their term sheet was on 15 million, but then they hired these lawyers from Cooley from US, and they're supposed to be the best lawyers, Sequoia, and they had this term in the contract say that 15 million is the base price, and they adjust it for the cash or receivables or whatever, for the cash balance. So basically, that contract, they thought that we have valuing you 15 million, then you have to pay like another $1 million to other people and all that. So we could negotiate these guys down to 14 million. So the day we signed, so this called everyone, and I mean, see, we were also knew the contracts and how the business mechanics work, and we call everyone, every customer, every supplier, got all the cash in, and then if they could do a cash down, we could do a cash up as well. So they ended up paying, and they tried to, in the negotiation, they tried, no, this is not right. But I said, no, we this is your contract, your term sheet, so let's do it. So we managed to squeeze in another 0.5 million for our investors because of that particular clause. And then we acted and we got all the cash, dues, everything collected. And by the time we were selling the company was cash positive, and so that's how that 0.5 million came in.
Well done. I think if any of us are in that position, we'll come and speak to you about that. But what are you going to do now? You've kind of gone through the journey, achieved it. I understand that you're now looking at angel investments, etc. What is the next 2-3 years for Imal? Or next 5 years?
I mean, for me, like I like to share my knowledge and probably help Sri Lankan entrepreneurs to go global. And I mean, if I can inspire them, if we could do it, if our team could do it, why others can't? I mean, there were nothing great about us. Like, we were also normal people, but we were committed to what we do. So if you are also committed, you can do it. If Nsinga could do it, others can do it, right? Because we are coming from similar backgrounds. So, and now even we didn't have like co-working or Hatch, all these councils, investors. Now at least we have that ecosystem coming up, right? So I think we can help. I'm happy to help. That's one area. And the other thing is, like, I'm also running systems integration or IT solutions provider. This thing, I mean, that's my passion also, to keep me engaged. But there's a team running it, but I'm keeping myself engaged on that. And at the same time, I still have few more months to help Selingo do the post-merge integration. It's becoming less and less intense on time. So I've invested in few companies, so working with those founders, and that's what I'm doing, and hopefully I can continue to do that and help mentor, coach them, and get them faster, because at least we can help them not to repeat the mistakes we did, so that they can get there faster, right?
Absolutely. And I think that's a great thing. I think, I think once you achieve success, coming and putting it back into the ecosystem will really help accelerate the ecosystem, because that's how Silicon Valley, etc., all these places started. Like, that's why you heard about the PayPal mafia. Um, One of the big problems that I see in our ecosystem, Imal, is maybe companies not really working on the right problems, right? Or working on very already done problems, or maybe problems that don't necessarily scale. Do you see that as well? Do you take that up? Do you chalk it up to maybe not having enough experience? Because I see your success as clearly identifying a gap in the market, and it's a scalable problem, which then now you've been able to take over. So can you talk a bit about that, of your experience of Sri Lankan entrepreneurs, and maybe what they're doing wrong?
Yeah. Uh, so the first thing is like identifying that the need in the market. Like, it's not difficult to hit. I mean, put a nail in a wall, but it's to understand what's the place it needs to be inserted. That's the thing, right? So basically, I see a lot of people. They first want to, because startups is glamorous, right? So you want to be entrepreneur and startup, so you want to jump into something and do something, and in that process you are picking up a problem. Either it's a wrong problem to solve, or maybe it's technically sexy to solve, right? So that these are the kind of things that people will get into. It's not something that, it's not a, it's always a project. It's not a product which can like scale. So these are the problems we see. So it's important to identify that problem, what you're going to solve. I think even if you don't have that, but if you have the right team who's also very agile and learning from mistakes, you can quickly pivot that and find an area where you can work on with your skill set, right? So initially that's what we also did, right? So if you ask me, did we knew exactly what problem we're going to solve at the day one? We didn't, but we had like a like a big area where we thought that we could do something, and we were zooming in, and then we got it. So at least get to that fast, identify that, and we got challenged many times to come into that, right? It's not only us thinking, but we got challenged. We got like, "Oh, guys, you are you're doing something wrong," and we got all these feedbacks, and that helped us to fine tune the problem. So first thing is like, if you have a good team who is willing to learn and readjust and recalibrate. I think even if you start with a like not the right problem and the solution, you can adjust it and get somewhere. But it's very important, before you put the money in and really going to expand on it, make sure that you really have cracked it at a very early stage.
Yeah,
Because once
absolutely.
you're too big and pivoting when you're big, it's not easy, right? So that's an expensive affair.
Yeah, thanks, Amal. That's a question from Deepna. Thanks for coming in today, Deepna. What would be your advice for someone who wants to go straight into building his own startup without going for a job and getting the experience and exposure in the corporate world?
That's if you are doing a B2B, solving a B2B problem, B2B startup, I highly recommend you to at least work in some kind of organization, understand that industry. Otherwise, I think it'll be very difficult. But in the B2C, maybe yes, because it's a day-to-day problem you are cracking, right? A day-to-day problem you are cracking, and you probably can crack. But at the same time, to run a company, you need someone. If you don't have that experience, then get a co-founder who has that experience, because you can build the product, but the other guy can build a company. Because building a product is one thing, building a company is another thing, right? Company needs to last. So I highly recommend either have that co-founder who understand to build the company, or you get that experience. That always better, because it's not only coding, or it's not only building something technically, but it also making it work from the business case point of view. And and being able to sell it, right? All that. Otherwise, like you can probably raise money, then you can hire all these people, but still you need to know how to manage these people and run a company, right? Again, it comes down to that. So my recommendation is get that experience, or get that experienced person with you to do that.
So there's a question, anonymous, possibly asking you whether you want to do this. But did you ever did you ever think to merge or acquire companies to scale and grow more rather than get acquired?
I see. I started with these big multinationals and big companies, and I got tired, and then I wanted to do something more agile and lean and small. So I think I'm better at creating these smaller things. Probably will these things work like as a small cells and work in conjunction rather than building big large companies and running it. Probably I'm not the right person for that, and I probably wouldn't enjoy that either.
Yeah, I think there are different kinds of entrepreneurs, right? Those that are very good from 0 to 1, 1 to 100, 100 to 1,000, right? So I say that maybe your strengths would be like the 1 to 100, maybe the 100 to 1,000 is leave it to someone else.
Yeah, 100 to 1,000. I wouldn't enjoy it, right? So let me put it that way. Yeah.
There's another question. When did you start thinking about exit? Did you have it? Did you start thinking that from the start, basically?
I mean, to be honest, no. I mean, we had this question from the investors as, what is your exit plan? Early days, I said, no, I want to build something which lasts and which is good. And I'm not building something for exit. And that was never the purpose that why we built Nsinga or N-Factory is not with exit in mind. It just happened, but we also were not in the mindset that, hey, we're going to quickly build this, and if that's the thing, if you're building something to sell, then you're not probably building it properly. That's my view. But at the same time, we were not too much hang on to it. Like when the offer came in, we said, okay, good. I mean, let's do it. Let's complete our journey as entrepreneurs, and and we can build it again. We had that confidence, right? We can build it again. We know the drill now, right? So we have built it, we have scaled it, we have raised funds, we have exited, so we can do it again. So that's what we want to do at this point in time, because rather than the joy of exit, it's about completing that whole cycle, right? And with giving returns whoever believed in us, and putting that big burden from your head to this thing, oh, I've done it, right? So that was the kind of feeling we had, and we did exit because of that. And I think it was good exit hindsight. Like, it happened in Jan. If it hadn't dragged for another 1 month, COVID was already started in China, and I don't know what happens, right? So then probably we are not having this conversation. I would have been struggling by now, right? So it's all good timing as well.
I think being an entrepreneur, many talk about the exit and the success and the money that you make at the end. But I think being an entrepreneur, it's all about enjoying the journey to that destination rather than the destination itself. Would you agree with that? Would you want to go back and start the journey?
I mean, we enjoy it. I mean, go ahead.
Sorry. And I think a lot of entrepreneurs in Sri Lanka or startups keep thinking about the destination. And my advice would be, start enjoying the journey, or start enjoying like you did. Enjoy what you do, and just become the best of that.
I think even if you're doing a job, what I have been doing also, I wanted to be the best networking engineer. Because I want to do it proper, right? So And similarly, we wanted to build the best product for that what we do, and we wanted to build a good company and a culture and all that. So I think we need to do that. Stop thinking about exit. And we never thought that exit would happen this fast. It happened, right? And so if you would have been thinking, we would have had a lot of sleepless nights because that was not coming, right? So then you stop enjoying it. So enjoy every minute of it, because it's not, you're not going to make a lot of money doing startups until you get exit. But if you start thinking about it, then my god, like, it'll be a lot of stress. So you should enjoy your work, and you should enjoy being with your team and being with your customers, and solving those problems. If you have that mindset, then you can get there, and someone will really see, hey, this is a good setup. Because why Selengo bought us, they one thing was the product, and also they saw that this is a good team with a good culture, and they're committed people and they're passionate people, right? So they saw that as well, because it's a culture, it's the company, it's the product, everything, right? And that kind of thing can be only built with good attitude. Otherwise, if the people, you can't get them to commit to a long term thing, they will not come into you, right? And they are also coming to you with expecting quick returns, and when that doesn't happen, they leave. And then the company is always in that kind of short term mode, everyone, right? So you can't build that great product or great company with that kind of mindset. Of course, you need to have a who are the people going to buy, and you need to build something which is valuable for you and for others. Then someone would come anyway.
I just want to remind everyone we're in our last final 10 minutes. So if you have any questions, please post them up. I have a question for Imal. What do you believe is your biggest failure as an entrepreneur? And maybe what did you learn from it?
Yeah, I mean, so we had a lot of moments. There were times where we had to let some people go, right? That was the one of the saddest things. Like, people who really contributed to build the company, and sometimes they decided to make their own path, right? So it could be due to something, some mistakes, or you did, or it could be their decision. So I mean, these were the things that kind of failures, I would see. Temporary setbacks we had. Some good people left the company in certain periods. So we were really had setbacks with those, especially around people. That's the main thing. Apart from that, from the business wise, so we probably have done mistakes on hiring wrong people. That those were the biggest failures, and we have kept doing it, right? So even lesson after lesson, like, sometimes you keep making that mistake. And that's the hiring and the people. That's the biggest mistakes we have done, and the biggest learnings we have done around that.
I guess a lot of startups now going through very difficult times, COVID. Probably they've had to let go of people, cut down costs. Things might be looking bleak for some of them, at least, especially if they're in travel. What would you tell these startups having gone through difficult times? What would be your advice to them going forward?
Yeah, I think just keep faith. I mean, you have decided to be an entrepreneur, right? So it's not easy. So there are hard times, but if you go through these hard times, if you look at MIT started 1996, a central bank bomb went off, and no one. I mean, it's a bad timing for them to start. No one wanted to give business that time, right? No one wanted to spend on IT. Sri Lanka economy was at an all-time low, and there were a lot of companies started in those times. But if you have gone through that, then you will be you your learnings from that and how you run that business in difficult times will make sure that if you survive that period, then you will be really a great company, because you could survive this kind of a blow. For whatever way you can survive, I think you will be a great company. So just have that faith, and everyone understands it. Have very honest conversations. Like I had situations where I was about to run out of cash, like weeks away. Like when the Dinesh money came in, like just the day before that, I couldn't pay salaries. I think I didn't know he knew that, right? But so one day before the technical bankrupt, the money, and like that, like we had like many times like no money to pay salaries next month, and I call everyone. I say, this is a situation. We need to close this deal. We need to collect this money. And sometimes people think that when I share with this, does everyone leaves me or whatever, right? No, I think those are the people who will be with you, that work with you together to come out of it. And they are the people that if these people are going to leave in difficult times, let them leave. That's the best thing can happen to the company.
Yeah, absolutely. We got a really good question by Nuthishan. Nuthishan, thanks for coming. When you raised the first investment, how did you value the company? How did you decide how much you want to raise, and any lessons learned during this process?
Yeah. So when we first pitched to, because we set up the company in Singapore, and I had like Ashok who was doing our fundraising. You know what? Like first we started pitching, hey, our company worth like 15 million, and we want to raise like 4-5 million, right? That's like back in 2015. So we started all this, and people asked whether we are crazy, right? And come down to, okay, 8 million. We didn't know how to value. So finally, finally, when Dinesh came in, it was like we were making $200,000 revenue, and they valued the company at $2 million, like 10x revenue. And out of that 10x revenue, then how much you want money and how much you can give. 500K, you wanted money, so you had to give away, 20% of the company post money, right? So that's the kind of valuation we did. It's like generally for a good startup, 10x of new is generally the rule of thumb that you value, right? But when we exited, like I think we got like 20x when they exit, because we knew that they needed us, right? They needed us to complete the jigsaw puzzle, or they had to spend another 2 years of precious time or 3 years precious time to build that product. And still by that time somebody would have taken the market, right? So that's why for a M&A, that if you are in a strong footing, you are sitting on cash, you are doing well, then you can say whatever the money that you want is your valuation. It's like you have your land, and then someone wants to buy it, you tell that if you don't want to sell it, you sell a high figure. If you want to sell it, really you sell a low figure, or you look at what is the value that the next door has gone, right? And that's a benchmark. But if the next door guy came in for your land, you obviously tell a higher value, because he has to buy it, right? So it's like that. So no hard and fast rule, but rule of thumb is like you do, like if you're a good startup, 10x, 5 to 10x is reasonable when you're raising money. If you're a decent, anywhere between that, because now the times have changed. You probably won't get 10x these times, so it's not a good time to raise money if, for valuations, right? But if you are dying, get that money at any valuation, because you have to first survive.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So there are no further questions, but I really appreciate your time here with us, Imal, and I think we've hit the 7 o'clock time. Is there any final words of wisdom that you want to leave with the startups, and especially with product market fit, especially with helping them with funding, especially with helping them find the right problem to solve? Are there any other pearls of wisdom you want to leave? I'll leave it open to you.
Yeah, I think product market fit is very important, that we need to crack it as early as possible. That's one of the critical success factors. And the other thing is how you are keeping your team together, and are they in it because they love what they do, and then they'll stick, and the company will the changes to the plan or the product or whatever. If you have a good team and you have the good funding, again, a good set of investors, right? So keep doing what you're doing. Don't lose faith. When I say keep doing what you're doing, if you're doing a wrong thing, don't do it. Keep doing it. But what we are saying is, if you believe in what you're doing and if it's the right thing, the ups and downs, don't give up. Just believe it and go for it. And if you do it for passion, and you will be a success. At the same time, like, be yourself, right? So don't try to be someone else. Like,
yeah. Thank you, Mal. I also like to thank.
Keep your.
Sorry, Mal, you weren't done. Sorry about that.
Be it about obviously.
Hello.
I said, like, don't think too much about the exit and the money part. Keep doing what you like, and that.
Okay, sorry, Mal. I think the line was cutting in a bit. But thank you very much. I'd also like to thank our partners, Seed, BYLC Ventures, and Pro Pakistani, for streaming this across Pakistan, Bangladesh, and Sri Lanka. Looking forward to our next conversation that we'll be having as well. And if you do want to get in touch with Imal with any questions, please shoot us an email. We'll try and answer it, and definitely pass it on to Imal as well. Thank you guys. Thanks, Imal. Thank you, Imal.
Thanks, Jeevan. Thanks for having me. Thank you.